Hello everyone, welcome to This Day. It is Saturday and it's November 19th, the weekend before Thanksgiving. All right, on our show today, we have two doctors. One is Dr. Adam Solomon, and he's here with Memorial Care. And he has an update for us regarding all sorts of things, COVID, hospital, lots of different things that he wants to talk about. And then we have Dr. Hovanessian, who is here on behalf of Harvard Eye Associates. All right, let's take a look at our weather. Well, we have a very pleasant weekend ahead. 74-50 today, tomorrow 74-58, and then on Monday, 73-52, so very pleasant. And if you are traveling, the numbers look pretty good at the beaches. The mountains are pretty good during the day, but overnight is chilly. Beaches 73-52, 72-48, 69-45. Palm Springs 72-47. Tahoe 45-15. Big Bear 45-18. And Mammoth 40-10. Las Vegas, as you can see the numbers there. Our sunrise this morning was at 6:26, and our sunset will be at 4:46. All right, when we come back, we will have Dr. Adam Solomon, so stay tuned.
Hey, beach walkers, grandkid chasers, stair climbers, dance lovers, weekend warriors, and yogis. Your life demands activity, and joint pain shouldn't hold you back. Get personalized joint care that's as unique as you, with high satisfaction rates to prove it. At Memorial Care, your joint replacement patient navigator will be by your side, helping you safely return to more. Like another beach, extra hug, and one more song. More from life is calling with Memorial Care.
Welcome back. Well, as I mentioned, we have Dr. Adam Solomon here, who is here on behalf of Memorial Care. Well, welcome. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you. Great to see you.
So, of course, the last time we had you here, we were kind of right in the throes of COVID-19 and all of the things that we were super worried about. And I think now, pretty much coming out of it, there's a lot of things I think we still don't know. And even just talking to you prior, you know, we're still dealing with it, but many of us probably think it's not as bad as it was. So with that said, just kind of give me an overview of what you guys are dealing with right now.
Well, we're still seeing patients coming in. Our urgent cares continue to get a steady stream of people with symptoms. Mm-hmm. And, coming into fall, there isn't just COVID, there's influenza starting to be seen and just regular colds and other things. But you don't necessarily always know. Flu symptoms frequently could be from a variety of different viruses.
Right.
We have seen the testing positivity, the percentages of those patients that come in with symptoms that get tested that are positive for COVID has come down.
Right.
But we've seen this before. For some reason, COVID does tend to come in these waves. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, we're now in a lower point than we've been in quite some time.
Yeah, exactly. Now, let's talk about some of that testing, because I find it kind of all over the map. So, for instance, you may have someone who tests negative, which is good, and they have a cold. But then you've got somebody who tests positive, but they have similar types of symptoms that are more related to a cold or a flu. So what are those tests looking for?
Yes, that's the other challenge with COVID. It's so variable in how people experience it. Some people have no symptoms. Some people will have cold-like symptoms, congestion and so forth, and then others really get sick. It gets into their chest and high fevers and all that kind of thing,
right.
More like a flu.
Right.
So in general, there are two types of tests. The most common one that you'll see now, which we weren't seeing as much earlier, is what's called an antigen test.
Yes.
It tests for the proteins that the virus makes.
Okay.
So to have those proteins around, it means that the virus is replicating in the body, mm-hmm. and it's potentially being spread. So those tests are not quite as sensitive as the earlier tests, which I'll talk about in a second. But when they're positive, it suggests that you are able to spread the virus to other people at that point. It's actively replicating and it's coming out, and you can see that on that viral antigen test.
Yes. And those are the ones, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but those are the ones that were sent to us by the government, right?
Correct.
Okay.
You can buy them in the
at-home
store.
ones.
We got
Okay.
those free ones. And one of the reasons why we're seeing a lower positivity is more people are testing themselves at home, and it's positive. They don't need to come in and get tested again.
Right.
The tests are very specific, meaning that if it's positive, it's COVID.
Okay.
On the other hand, it's what's called sensitivity. Will it pick it up if you have it? That's much lower, especially if you don't have symptoms. So someone that got exposed or maybe is having the earliest stages of something and they test and it's negative, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not infected yet.
Right.
The other test that we were doing originally, called a PCR, or polymerase chain reaction test, it looks for the DNA or the RNA, the genetic material that makes up the virus.
Okay.
That can be there very early because it amplifies it. It makes copies and copies and copies to detect very small quantities of that RNA. And you can still have some of that RNA even after the virus is cleared out. So it's much more sensitive. You can pick it up earlier. It lasts a lot longer.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why we weren't using those tests to clear people, because it could last for weeks and a person might not be infectious anymore.
Right.
Whereas the antigen test is more specific for somebody being infectious at the time.
Right. Well, having COVID myself, we go through the tests. And you're right. Those tests actually are pretty good because at one point I would do it because I was visiting my elderly father, and it was negative, which was great. But then the minute I did feel like I wasn't feeling good, I took it, and it immediately said that I was positive. Yeah. So at that point, then we do stay home and we wait it out for the 5 days. But then we go and have that other test through a CVS or Walgreens or something like that. And so you're saying that those are a much higher sensitivity rate.
It just depends which type of test that they're doing.
Okay.
So if they're doing and so it's worth asking, is this an antigen test or is it a PCR?
I see.
We shouldn't be using a PCR for clearing people because of what I just mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Early on in the pandemic, I saw people that were clearly better. It's been weeks since they had been infected, and yet the PCR continued to be positive just because they were clearing out the remnants of what had been there.
I see.
So now the antigen tests are much more useful for saying we're clear.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And one thing just to mention, so even though at 5 days people are permitted to go out, there's still a lot of data to show people continue to shed virus probably up to about 10 days.
Wow.
So after day 5, potentially people can go out, but they should still stay away from people and wear a mask.
Okay.
Just because there's a risk of exposing others.
Still that risk. Wow. Okay, so we always wonder, is this ever going to go away, right? And you have different variants, so it keeps mutating and does all these different things. So where are we at with the variants now?
Yeah, so we've gone through these different variants. One of the things, or two of the things that we've learned over the course of the last couple of years that we suspected would be true but didn't know until this happened, was that the coronavirus, it mutates. It's an RNA virus, and so errors occur when it's copying itself. Sometimes those errors make it a little bit more infectious or help it to attach a little bit better to the lining of our lungs, and it makes it more likely to spread. And so we've seen that occur, and when that happens, because it's somewhat random, you can get what's called a variant, a different type, a slight change in part of the virus, usually on what we call the receptor binding domain, that little spike that comes out that attaches onto our cells. And we've named them when they occur, because when one comes up and it's a little bit more adept at attaching or infecting people, that becomes the predominant strain of the time until another one comes out, which is a little bit more effective.
Right.
So we went through Alpha and then Delta, and currently the group that is spread the most throughout the United States, including Southern California, is this Omicron variant. And even within Omicron, there are subvariants. So you might hear about BA.2.75 or BA.4, BA.5. Right now, BA.4 and BA.5 are the most common subvariants of Omicron that we're finding out in the community.
Is it becoming more complicated or less complicated?
In a way, it's becoming more complicated. It is difficult to know what those changes will cause.
Yeah.
So we can detect when there's a change that occurred, but what does that mean? Sometimes it means that the surface of the receptor binding domain, where we make our antibodies to block it from attaching, changes so slightly that our antibodies can't attach anymore.
Man.
And so it evades our immunity. Sometimes it helps so that it is just able to more strongly attach to those proteins on our cells.
Wow, it's just an amazing, unfortunate circumstance that we're having to deal with this. Is there any projected time frame that you think we won't have to deal with it? Or is it something just like our flus and things that we're going to be dealing with every year?
It's not really known. The suspicion is it likely will be persistent because it is just continuing to do this variation. And so
Right.
we're probably going to see these periods where it seems to be going away and then a variant comes out and spikes again.
So let's talk about vaccines. So obviously we had the wonderful vaccination clinics that we did very early on, and of course with Memorial Care's help, we were one of the first in the nation to do this, and it's extraordinary how well it kept the Laguna Woods numbers down.
Yeah.
And at this point now, what should our seniors be thinking about in terms of boosters and vaccines?
Yeah, so it really, I mean, as I was walking in and people said, it's been so long since I've been here, I was thinking I was just here a few months ago, and yet it's been well over a year and a half since we had that original campaign. And fortunately, the Laguna Woods residents were able to get those initial vaccines well ahead of everybody else.
Right.
But that campaign throughout the United States, I think, was very effective in preventing untold thousands of people from dying. It was very interesting. I was looking at those spikes that I was just talking about, and in that winter from 20 to 21, right before and at the time of the vaccination starting, the number of people that the number of cases that we saw, it spiked up, and hospitals across the country got somewhat overwhelmed, and there were so many people that died from COVID.
Right.
We started that vaccination campaign, and the following year, last winter, we saw another significant spike in the number of cases, but the number of people that got admitted to the hospital and the number of people that died from COVID was far, far less. Okay. And that's one of these things that the vaccines are so good at doing, is reducing the severity of disease so that people end up, they still get sick frequently, not always, but it does help reduce the risk of dying.
Right.
So right now, the CDC recommends that everybody get one more booster of the current one that's out there. So just to go back, we talk about the primary series. So when a person first gets vaccinated, there's a series of 2 vaccines. And for people that have a weak immune system because they're on certain medications or genetically they don't have a normal immune system, they might need 3. But that initial set of vaccinations is called the primary series.
Okay.
After that, everything is called a booster. And the primary series gets your body ready to react if it gets exposed to COVID. So the other thing, and just to kind of go back for a second, I mentioned there were 2 things that we learned. One was this variation that we see in COVID. The other was that our immunity tends to wane with time. And we had seen that with other types of coronavirus, that people could get it again and again.
Right.
We weren't sure why that was. Was it due to the changes of the virus or because our immunity tended to fade? And it turns out a little bit of both. We do have a fading of our immunity, which is the reason for these boosters, to re-stimulate that original response.
Right.
So right now, they've just recently authorized a new bivalent booster. So bivalent, what does that mean? Bi being 2 and valent having 2 different types.
Okay.
So the new booster that just got authorized has part of it, the original strain that was in the original vaccinations. But the other half of it is specifically against this BA.4, BA.5 Omicron variant, the one that's the most prevalent.
Okay.
And the idea is if we can get a little bit ahead and have people become immunized against this predominant variant, perhaps it will help prevent us from having another surge this winter like we have the last couple of winters.
Right.
So just going back to your question, the recommendation is for everyone that's received their primary series, regardless of the number of boosters they've had since, because some people might have had 1 or 2, they should get 1 dose of the current new booster.
Okay.
That dose shouldn't be before 2 months have passed since the last dose of whatever dose you got, if it was a
Okay.
primary series or a booster.
Okay.
So at least 2 months later, then 1 of these doses of this current bivalent booster.
Okay, so let's talk about the vaccine versus not getting the vaccine. So we are finding that people who are vaccinated are still getting sick, but as you mentioned, they may not be getting as sick. So what happens with people who are getting COVID? Are they developing antibodies?
Yes. So getting COVID will boost the immunity against COVID. It's similar to getting a vaccination. It's just another opportunity for the body to see the virus, react to the virus, and develop some memory to it.
Right.
The other thing we've seen, and because there was a lot of talk about, well, natural immunity's got to be better than the vaccination, and it turns out that's not completely true. That although the immunity to the virus is more broad because it is other parts of the virus get included, those parts of the virus aren't what binds to our cells.
Okay.
It's those spikes. So in a way, the vaccination is more specific to help block that attachment, but being infected also provides a certain amount of immunity. Both of those immunities tend to wane.
Right.
And also with the variation that we're seeing, that also makes that immunity a little bit weaker over time. So even if somebody's had COVID, whether or not they've been vaccinated, it's still worth getting the booster because you may have not had the same strains or the same variants that are coming out now.
So if you have COVID or you had COVID at some point, do you jump right to the booster or do you get the original vaccinations?
It's still recommended for everyone to get that original series, that primary series, because even if you had COVID, we don't know how effective your immunity would be against the current strains that are out there.
And when you say it wanes over time, is there a particular time frame?
It's variable. We do see it come down a lot faster in seniors than we do in younger folks, but it does vary quite a bit.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to talk to you when it comes to getting COVID is long COVID. So there's a lot of people who have been over COVID, but they have these wild symptoms that go on for weeks, sometimes months.
Yes. And they've been seeing an increase in risk for heart attacks and strokes in people for up to a year after their infection with COVID. So it's another one of the reasons why it's very beneficial to get the vaccination. It lowers the likelihood that someone will get long COVID. And not just symptoms, loss of smell and taste, and as I mentioned, those risks for clotting. But also memory fog or brain fog.
Right.
People find it difficult to think, remember, and also it can affect moods. We've seen this in kids where they may not get as sick as adults do, but they can have persistent symptoms. About a third of kids who get infected with COVID can have difficulty concentrating and thinking and with energy, and it can really affect their ability to succeed at school.
Wow. Well, this is great information. Let's talk a little bit about flu shots, because there was some discussion, I can't remember where I read this or heard this, was that they were going to maybe combine the COVID shot, I don't know if that was the vaccine or if it was the booster, with the flu shot. Is that still in discussion?
Yes, there's been a lot of talk about that, but right now there hasn't been a combination influenza COVID vaccine that's been authorized or approved yet.
Okay.
So right now the flu vaccine is available. And I would encourage people to go out and get their flu vaccine now. We're already seeing some influenza in the community. And there's no reason why you can't get the flu shot and your COVID booster at the same time.
Oh, really?
Again, the only thing on the timing of the COVID boosters, it has to be at least 2 months since the last one.
Right.
But both of those vaccinations can occur simultaneously.
Okay, great. And also, I know that you guys have a patient navigation center that's open 24/7. Now, what is that?
Yeah, so for memorial care patients, we have a concierge line for Laguna Woods Village residents. They can call. They can call anytime, and it can be for something as simple as arranging for getting their flu and COVID shots.
Okay.
Or if there are other questions or they need assistance getting scheduled to see an appointment, that kind of thing.
Okay, and that is a number that is specific to memorial patients, and that's 657-241-8475. So they can call that anytime. I mean, if you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you just can't stand it and you got to make an appointment.
Yes. Well, and I'll tell you also, we have a web page devoted specifically to Laguna Woods Village residents.
Yes.
memorialcare.org/Laguna Woods.
Perfect.
And we also offer 24/7 virtual urgent care. So we've really expanded. One of the things with COVID is it's expanded our telehealth capabilities.
Yeah.
And it's much more convenient getting care from the comfort of your own home, and many things can be treated virtually. And so that's on that website is a way to arrange for a virtual urgent care visit, get seen anytime by a clinician, and potentially get diagnosed or identify if it's something that needs an appointment to be scheduled for the next day.
Perfect. If you want more information about what we have discussed, you can, of course, call the number that's on your screen, 657-241-8475, or the dedicated website that is specifically for our Laguna Woods Village. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We have Dr. John Hovanesian here, who is going to share with us a new technology for dry eye. Well, welcome.
How are you? It's nice to see you,
Good.
Lisa.
Nice to see you too. And I read this twice because I went, wait a minute, a nasal spray for dry eye. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
How does this come about?
Well, it's a little bit of a mind bender, isn't it? We have medications for dry eye. There are now 3 FDA approved, and this is the 4th medicine for dry eye, not just lubricant drops, but medicine that we put in the eye. And this one is different because we put it not in the eye, but in the nose.
Okay.
Well, to start with, a lot of people hate eye drops, right? They sting. And all of the commercially available FDA-approved medicines do sting.
Right.
Whereas, not that putting something in the nose is entirely exciting for people, but it is an alternate way to do it.
Right.
And so this medicine, which is called Tyrvaya,
Okay.
is now available by prescription.
Okay.
You get it at a pharmacy, and it's designed to use the nerves and the way they connect to the to the brain
Right.
through the nose. And
Right.
I think if you get something spicy in your mouth or in your nose, pepper, you are going to perhaps sneeze a little,
Right.
and your eyes are going to water, right?
Right.
That's because those nerves are all connected, and the nerves you stimulate in the nose with this medicine, not just as you put it in, but for a number of hours afterwards,
Okay.
will then stimulate the nerves that also send a signal to the glands that produce tears.
Right. So I know we have a slide about the glands. So tell me the difference between the 2 different kinds of glands that we have in our eyes.
Yeah, well, so there's really 2 sets of structures, and then a third that's in the eyelid that make up the complicated chemistry of the tears. For you to see well, when you think about it, to have the surface of the eye covered with skin that's like the rest of our skin, but specially structured to be clear, and then to have an optically smooth surface, glassy smooth like a lens, requires a water film, and it has to be beautifully smooth for us to see well, and that takes a lot of chemistry. There's lipid, which is like oil, there's water, which makes up most of it, and then there's mucus that coats the surface of the actual structure of the eye. And all 3 of those layers are made by different parts of the eye. But the helpful thing about this medicine is that it stimulates all 3. Because when we use nerves to stimulate the tear, functional unit in the eye, that produces all the layers of the tears. None of the other medicines are known to do that.
Interesting. That's
Yeah, so
interesting.
that makes it
What is the activated ingredient in that?
Yeah, so it is it's called a cholinergic agonist, which means that it stimulates nerves that, in this case, produce tears. The same medication has also been used as for smoking cessation, as a pill, to help people who smoke to quit smoking. Chantix is the name of that medicine.
No
So same medication has been used before, but obviously it's not used as a nasal spray here. It's been reformulated.
Right.
So it's generally fairly tolerable. It doesn't sting, although a lot of people sneeze, especially in the first few doses.
Sure.
You put something in your nose, it does induce you to sneeze. Most people, 98% of people who do, say that that's pretty mild sneezing, and it's, okay, I can deal with it because my eyes are now feeling better.
Well, sure. Now, how long does it last? Is it something that it says twice daily medication?
Yeah.
So an 8-hour type thing?
Yeah, at least. I mean, it should be 12, right? If it's twice daily, but it's used twice daily and seems to produce an effect for even 24 hours with that twice daily dosing.
Okay.
So something you'd probably take up in the middle, in the beginning of the day, and then maybe late in the afternoon or in the evening. And it is a new medicine. And anytime there's a new medicine, coverage by insurance is variable. I think we have pretty good coverage for people who have Medicare and secondaries. But even that, depending on your secondary plan, depending on the drug plan you have, it could affect what you pay out of pocket.
Okay.
With time, these things always get better as drugs become, have an opportunity to get on more insurance plans.
Right.
We don't have any financial interest as doctors in this. We prescribe a drug because it's helpful to our patients. But I bring it to you today because I think our viewers are probably interested in knowing if you've got dry eye, there's a new option that's available to them.
I'm wondering, in the studies that they did on this, does it show that after using it for a period of time, can you lessen using it because it stimulated them and now all of a sudden they're working correctly?
It's a really great question, and it's and generally that is true. Generally, so we find that with the other products like Restasis and Lifitegrast, which is Xiidra, and then the third one, Isuvis, is really used for episodes of dry eye, so we don't use it long term. But we are starting to notice that with patients that.
Oh, that's great.
And it's simply because as you sort of exercise those tear glands and get them to work more, they respond more to a little less stimulus.
Right.
And so less medication, maybe once a day dosing.
That's great. You're training yourself. That's great.
You're training your
Good.
eyes.
That is awesome news. Well, thank you so much for the information. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's neat, isn't it? I mean,
It
so
is
many
great.
great developments that are always coming in medicine and in eye care in particular.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you want more information about this particular medication, or if you have any questions about your eyes, you can always contact Harvard Eye at harvardeye.com, or you could call them at 949-951-2020. We'll be right back. Our movie for today is called Fall, and by the picture it looks absolutely frightening because they're so high up. So basically Becky and Hunter, their life is all about conquering fears and pushing limits. But they climb 2,000 feet to the top of a remote abandoned radio tower, 2 p.m. with subtitles and 6 p.m. without, and that is brought to you by Hogue. And then on Monday it's called McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and it looks like a very interesting film, and that is starring Warren Beatty, and you can see that on Monday. Couple of announcements. Tree lighting is happening on December 2nd, and I think you and your grandchildren would certainly love this. It's December 3rd, Clubhouse 1 from 6 to 7, and it would be great if you could bring a new unwrapped children's gift, as the fire department will be there and they're going to be doing their toy drive. And then another item is the toy drive, of course, being put on by the Orange County Fire Authority. All right, let's take a look at our weather. Looking pretty good this weekend, right through next week. So today we are looking at temperatures in the 70s, actually. Looking for a lovely day of 74.50, 74.48, and 73.52. And if you are traveling, take a look at these numbers. Beaches look great. And then, of course, the mountains look good, but chilly temperatures at night. Have a great day and a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you again on Monday. Bye-bye.